We are going to get started. This is class number 6. There's my name, Ann Forrest, and my email address, seattleprepares@gmail.com, and I am delighted you're here. So we're going to talk about preparing with neighbors and preparing with community. Preparing with neighbors. I love this this flyer. It came from, I think it's California, but being prepared for an emergency begins with hello. It really is. The more you know your neighbors, the better off you are, whether it's a heat emergency, you need to borrow sugar, you've got a dog loose in the neighborhood, whatever the issue is, having people's names and knowing your neighbors is super important. So if you can at all, if you have the bandwidth, please get involved in your community and get to know your neighbors. It will serve you well in many different areas. Neighbors are your support until neighbors are your support until help arrives. I'm sorry, I'm trying to mute somebody that is not muted and I can't figure out who it is. Whether it's a fire in the neighborhood, a downed power line, you don't know what to do, or an earthquake, your neighbors truly are they are your source of strength. It's very, very different. We'll talk a little bit about this idea of, we can all pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and we're all in this, I don't think America realizes how interconnected we are. And this American rugged individualism it's a myth. That's not how the world works. It's not good for you. It is really a very, very bad thing. So this idea that we come home at night, we drive into our garage, or we get off the bus and we go in our house, we lock the door and we never come back out, it really does not serve us well. We are social creatures and we truly need each other. So I would encourage you to get out and get to know your neighbors. Being a hermit does not serve anyone well at all. We are the help until help arrives. I had this confirmed the other day. We had a chili cook-off in my neighborhood, and we closed down the street, and we had 6 neighbors that cooked chili, and a bunch of people came out and had chili and voted, and we had all kinds of fun stuff going on. We had the firefighters stop by because it's really easy to request that they make a drive-by if they're not busy. And somebody that has an interest in disaster preparedness, asked them how many firefighters and their medics are on duty at one time in the city of Seattle, and it's 210, which is the number I'd heard. And that number doesn't go up after an earthquake. If anything, that number goes down because people are injured, or they need to get home to their family, or they're off shift and they're stuck at home and they can't get into work. Most of the firefighters, police, ambulance drivers, all those kinds of folks, most of them do not live in the city of Seattle because it is so expensive. So their ability to get in and help any kind of response in the city is very, very limited. So that 210 firefighters and their medical folks that are on duty at any time during this, any time of day, night or day in Seattle, that doesn't increase. We don't prepare for disasters by putting more first responders on duty. We have what we have, and that's it. So the idea that your house on fire is going to get any attention is not realistic. They are going to go where the need is the greatest. So all this to say that you really need to rely on neighbors. Your greatest source of support and help is going to be from those immediately around where you live. It is not your mother-in-law who lives down in Renton. It is not your sister who's up in Linwood, over in Spokane or Ohio or whatever. Most of us tend to turn to family. They're not going to be of help in a disaster. So learn to turn to your neighbors. I just kind of went through all this. There's about 800,000 people living in Seattle, much higher if it's tourist season. We're closer to 1 million. And there's about 210 ambulances, ambulance personnel and firefighters on duty at a time. And that doesn't increase before a big earthquake. They don't live here, so they can't get here. So it is truly neighbors helping neighbors. I like this diagram, this preparedness pyramid, because it really illustrates where you can get what you need after a disaster. The bottom of the pyramid, the biggest source of resources for you is your household, you and your household members, you and your family. That is where your water and food for a couple weeks should be stored. It is where you need to be stockpiling your medications. Don't rely on someone else to give you medications. It's not going to happen. We all have to pee and poo after a disaster. Your emergency toilet needs need to be met at home. It is not something your neighbor is going to be able to provide for you. So the bulk of what you're going to need after a big disaster should be in your household. You can turn to your immediate neighbors to look out for one another, to check on one another, see how you're doing. Coordinate cooking. Oh my gosh, I think this is going to be so big. I can't even figure out exactly how big this is going to be after a disaster, but it's going to be big. Because if nobody has electricity because power's out, maybe there's been gas leaks in the neighborhood, so everybody's got their gas turned off. How are you going to cook? It's going to be barbecue grills. It's going to be little hibachis. It's going to be wood fires. It's going to be fire pits. It's going to be however we can figure it out. And not every household has that kind of capability. Not every household has a barbecue grill or propane. So let's get together and let's cook together. Our fridges and our freezers, as soon as the power goes off and doesn't come back on, they're going to start thawing out. So everybody's meat or leftover chili or whatever else you have in your freezer is going to be defrosted around day 3 or day 4. So get together with your neighbors and have a giant barbecue. That's what I see happening, is everybody cooking together to save resources, to save propane, and to just make life easier. It's so much easier to, so much nicer to have, 3 cans of green beans donated by 3 different households, and let's heat them all up together and then share it with those 3 families. So much easier to cook as a group than each one of your households trying to do it together. And then you can also share resources and share skills. Maybe somebody in your building, in your apartment building, has nursing capabilities or is a vet tech or who knows what. Figure out what resources are around you and use those. We're going to need to do this after a disaster. So that's what you can do with neighbors. You can coordinate big purchases if this is something somebody in your neighborhood can organize. You can learn how to turn off one another's gas so that somebody's house doesn't burn down or the apartment building doesn't burn down while everybody else is out at work. You can turn off their water. That's super easy to do. And if there's no reason for the water to be turned off and they arrive home and all the pipes are okay, they can turn the water back on. No harm, no foul. Combine your resources, combine your brains. We will be much better off if you're gathering with other folks and sharing ideas than just trying to figure out how to handle everything on your own. And then share, if you're doing okay, check on those that might need extra help. The elderly, the injured, kids, those with access and functional needs. There's going to be folks around you that need your help even more than you do. Like I said, somebody in your building, somebody on your block might have first aid skills and might have first aid gear. And then cooking together. I think that's going to be huge. You can also, if somebody in your neighborhood has a radio that's battery operated, you can tune into Cairo, that 97.3, and I can't remember what the AM station is, but have somebody on your block or in your building monitoring the radio. You don't all need to be doing that. You don't all need to be burning batteries to listen to the radio, but assign one person for the next 3 hours. I want you to sit and listen to the radio. Here's a pen, here's a pad of paper, write down anything important you might hear. There's lots of ways that neighbors can work together. You can also clean up together. So much fun, so much funner if you can gather together and sweep the hallways or sweep the streets or sweep one another's homes. So lots you can do together, and everybody has skills. Everybody will have something to add to this effort. That's the bottom 2 layers of the the preparedness pyramid. Let's talk about the community level. I am highly engaged with the emergency communication hubs here in Seattle. There are actually 4 missions with the hubs. Here's 2: gather and share information and match needs and resources. We're going to go to the more formal presentation. Keep in mind, we are social creatures. As much as we tend to be isolated kind of folks here in North America, or the United States, we are social creatures. We will gather together after a big disaster, and we're going to gather together in open spaces where nothing can fall on us. Because if we were in a building when the earth was shaking, stuff has been falling all around us and we are really scared. So we are going to go outside and we're going to gather together and we're going to put our brains together and we'll work together. It is what we do. It is universal across the globe. So we're going to gather in spaces like parks, pea patches. Some of them, a lot of them are super crowded, but some of them have big open areas. No power lines, no trees in the way, it's nothing but sun and grass. And parking lots are great for this. Again, you typically don't have power lines strewn across parking lots. They're big open spots. Hopefully they won't be too cracked, so they'll be nice and flat. They'll be nice and dry. You can gather together in parking lots. So let me back up a second. We are social creatures. We will naturally gather in open spaces. If you think about your neighborhood, you can probably name the place where if the community had to gather to work together, you would know exactly where to go. It's the parking lot of the neighborhood wine store, or it's the park, or it's the church parking lot. It's a place where you just know it's a natural gathering space. So the group that I volunteer with, the emergency communication hubs, have taken advantage of both these instincts we have. A, to work together because we're social creatures, and B, to gather together in places that are open to the sky. And so we have emergency communication hubs throughout Seattle. The map here on the left is available online, and I gave you a link to it in your homework for this week. So you want to find what's closest to you. This is a little down in the weeds, but I want to tell you that the icons on this map, the ones that have a hollow center, are spots that people will naturally gather. Your community will gather, but there's nothing organized there. It's just literally a gathering spot. The spots on the map where the icon, the radio icon, is colored in, these are emergency communication hubs that are organized. So hollow, they're not organized. Filled in, solid, they are organized. At most of the organized spots, there is a box like this. It's called a job box. It's made out of metal, it locks, really secure. Most of them can fit in the back of a pickup truck, just so you kind of get an idea of what kind of size we're looking at. This happens to be my emergency hub box. It's a little bit bigger than the one you just saw. This one happens to be 5 foot wide, but it is in the park in my community. It is up against the tennis court, and you can tell it's locked to the tennis court, so it's not going to walk away. It is not filled with food and water. Again, when you looked at that preparedness pyramid, food and water should be in your own household. The city of Seattle does not store food and water for the community, for all the residents. It truly is supposed to be supplied as much as possible by your house. What's in here is a bullhorn back there, markers and whistles and educational books and tables and bulletin boards, whiteboards and signs and caution tape. It's all this gear that we need to get organized to help our neighbors. And this is how we help. This is the mission of the hub, the four missions of the hub. We gather and share information. We match haves and needs. So gathering and sharing information. We're going to get information from neighbors just walking up saying, hey, did you realize there was a there was a power line down on Main Street. Is there somebody we should call about that? Well, we can call it in. We can try and let the city know about it. But more than anything, we want to put it on this board here that says there's a power line down at this area. Avoid that area. Stay away from it. So neighbors are going to tell us a lot of stuff. We're going to send volunteers out to get more information. Hey, I want you to go to the neighborhood nursing home. I want you to find out how things are doing. We're also going to ask people to listen to commercial radio like KIRO and amateur radio like ham radio. The city of Seattle has a group of really good, well-trained professional ham radio operators that are deployed after a large disaster. And that's how they plan on communicating, is using ham radio, because we're afraid it's kind of the backup system, but it's also might be the primary system. The fire department, police department, ambulances, all that, they have their own radio systems, but they may not work. So we may be using nothing but ham radio. So we can position somebody in the emergency communication hub to listen to ham radio talk and just write down what you're hearing, what bridge is closed, what hospital is open, that kind of stuff. And then maybe officials will stop by, fire, police, SDOT, whomever, might stop by the communication hubs and go, hey, we want to let neighbors know, and you guys are a great way to share information with your neighbors. Oh, here's a radio operator, a ham radio operator, listening and talking to other ham radio operators positioned at the hub. So we gather and share information so that folks know what's going on, because information will be really, really hard to come by. We also match haves and needs. This is just different ways we do it. This is the kind of gear that's in the box. This is a pantry organizer. This is our latest one. We have the paperwork to go with all this. We go really low tech after a disaster. It is all pencil and paper. We do not rely on computers at all. It is very low tech. So we find a family that has a tarp and the family that needs a tarp, and we hook them up. We find the household that needs diapers and the household that has diapers to share, and we hook them up. The family that lost a puppy and the family that found a puppy, we hook them up. The family that needs a broken window fixed and the able-bodied neighbor that can get up on a ladder and maybe throw some plastic across it, we hook those up. So we match haves and needs. The third thing we do in the hubs is we have a volunteer area. Folks are going to want to help, and we're going to deploy them really, really smartly. We're going to send them in 2s or 3s, because you never send anybody out by themselves, but you send folks in a pair at least with any equipment they might need. And we say, go up to the gas station and tell us what's going on there. Go to the grocery store and tell us what's going on there. Go to the nursing home and tell us what's going on there. So we send volunteers out to take care of issues and bring back information. Everyone has skills. So we gather information, we match haves and needs, we coordinate a bunch of volunteers. We also educate folks. I need to take a breath, I've been talking. So we have collected lots of really good information from Google, from the Environmental Protection Agency, from FEMA, from every place we can think of. And we have gathered it together and we have printed it off. So it's on paper and we have put it in a book called the Education Book. And we have it available for when we need it. This is an example. We all have 5 posters in our hubs. And it's basic information that you're going to need about water, about hazards, about food, about how to communicate, and about how to handle pee and poo. Put it on posters. We'll post it wherever we can so that some of your questions can be answered without tying up the education officer. But then we also have things like, this is a handout on, it looks, I'm not sure what it actually is. It might be how to handle stuff in your fridge. How long can food sit without being refrigerated? I'm not sure. But this one's in Amharic. So some of these are translated into languages that we might need. This one is how to handle a downed power line if someone is like stuck in a car and help's not going to be around to help them. So we printed out this kind of information. We have it in a book called the education book. So again, this is the mission of the hub: gather and share information, match haves and needs, organize volunteers to help them do the most good for the most amount of people, and educate. Next steps. So this is work. That's all I have to present tonight. This is your assignment going forward, is work on those your to-do list, that homework that you've been given week after week. Make sure you've gotten that done. You can always request training. The Office of Emergency Management has classes. You can ask to have somebody come to your block and teach you. We could either do it in person or on Zoom. Obviously, we were on Zoom for a long time, but I believe we're now going out to neighborhoods and talking to folks on your block or in your building to get everybody up to speed with the disaster preparedness message. There is a program that Seattle does. It's called SNAP, Seattle Neighborhoods Actively Prepare, and it's beyond the basics. It's kind of what you can do as neighbors together. So that program's available. And you've gotten information about how to request that training. And then just keep learning. Somebody had asked about the GMR or the radio class that's coming up, and I'll give you information about that. Just keep learning. This stuff does not sink in the first time. You need to hear it more than once. I'm thrilled that folks are attending these classes more than one time, because it really does take several times of hearing it for it to really sink in. So I would encourage you to keep learning. Again, you have my email address. I'm happy to answer questions. If you have something very specific, it is not a problem. I'm happy to do it.